Hi, everyone. I'm here with Matt Langlois, and we wanted to talk a little bit more about stability testing, which we've talked about in a few articles recently, and really how to follow up with the results and what you should do after you've done it and what you can do to improve your products. We started this whole process with a video from Matt talking about a very specific issue that we found that was kind of a complex stability issue. And so ended up going through a whole process of isolating the issue, finding out exactly what was going on. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I spend a lot of time here looking at long-term stability issues on DUTs, doing stability testing. I think it's a really good exercise for people to do on these devices. Um, there's a lot of really good information in the videos that Jason mentioned in our documentation on our website. So go check that out. What I want to talk about today is what do you do once you actually run those stability tests? Where do you go from there? Uh, the biggest thing in my experience is to make sure that the issue is reproducible. So let's say you've got a stability test that you started on a Friday, for example, before you go home for the weekend. So you started on a Friday, you come into the office on Monday, you go find the result and you look at it. And what do you do? Right. So for me, step number one is I'll go to the visualize tool within CD Router and look at the performance over time. And what I'm looking for is I want to make sure the performance is stable, right? And if there's any dips or drops, or what I've seen here a few times now actually is that performance will be good for a couple of days or 2 days. And then all of a sudden something will happen and it will just drop off completely and it won't recover, right?
Right.
Those are the kinds of things we're trying to identify with stability testing. So step number one, use a visualize tool, look at the performance. That is your heartbeat. And if you see that there's any dips or drops, now you've got something else that you can go and dive into
Right.
and try and figure out what's going on there. But before you even do that work of trying to figure out exactly what's going on, I like to also just make sure that it's reproducible. So what I would do in a case where I have maybe found a performance issue of some kind, I see like a little bit of a drop or some inconsistencies there with the visualize tool is I'll stop the test package. I'll go and I'll restart the DUT and then start the package up again, let it run for a few more days and make sure that it actually happens again. So that's, to me, step number one is go and look at the visualize tool, look for consistent and stable performance.
Mhm.
If you find something there that's curious or unexpected, like a little dip or a drop or something like that, restart it all and make sure it happens again. The next thing I would do, let's say I've actually identified some kind of a stability issue. There's like the example that we talked about when we started, or in the last video actually was there was a performance issue where performance was great for, maybe a day or so. And then all of a sudden, something happened and it just dropped and fell off a cliff
Right.
and it stayed there. Right. What I would do typically next at this point is look at the functional results. Right. So now I'll go and compare the functional results from one loop within that test run to the next loop and make sure that they are consistent.
Right.
That can be a little bit tedious. So one strategy that I also use here is to uh, try to make sure that all the functional tests that I've added to my stability test package pass, just to make it really, really obvious if there is some kind of a functional issue that
Right.
happens.
So at this point, you've created a test package that's like, barring anything else being strange, none of these should fail.
Correct. If you do actually see a failure, now you've got a clue basically as to um, where to jump in and start looking around. And what I've often found is that functional failures and performance degradation, they're not always correlated, but oftentimes they are. Another thing that you can look at that's really useful is the duration of the individual tests and compare those across weeks,
Okay.
right? Because sometimes what will happen is, um, this is actually really easy. It's built into CD Router's Visualize tool as well. But over time, sometimes protocol interactions uh, may start to take longer
Mhm.
as state builds up on the DUT,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
So CD writer still waiting and the test is passing, but something is going wrong. But
right,
it shouldn't be taken.
Exactly. And what you can see is that the duration of the individual tests, it might have been really, really fast at the start of the test run, and then slowly keeps creeping up over time. And eventually you might hit a timeout or something in CD router where, let's just a simple example, one of CD router's LAN client needs to refresh its DHCP, at least on the WAN. That early on might have been happening really quickly, but then as the stability test runs, it starts to take longer and longer, and eventually it might exceed a timeout that's within a test case, and that will show up as a test failure. Right? That's just another indication that something is going on, and that might be the start of uh, some bad behavior that results in your performance dropping.
Right.
So looking at test times is another great thing to do. Just taking a good look at the logs, trying to figure out if there's any anomalies in there. Um, all of these things are just good ways to try to zero in on exactly what's going on in those stability tests. Now, in the case where let's say your stability test run looked great, right? You come in, you started on Friday, it ran for 2.5 days over the weekend. You come in on Monday, functional test results are all pass. Performance is rock solid. It's a straight line. Now what do you do? Right? This is an opportunity now to sort of expand your stability testing, and you can do just more of everything to try and ensure that your devices are stable over even longer periods of time. So you can increase that test duration, let it run for a week, let it run for 2 weeks, right? And see what happens.
Right.
Maybe it just takes a little bit longer to have some of these stability issues appear. So let it run longer. That's the most obvious thing that I would recommend to people. In addition to that, another thing that you can do is start to add more test cases, add more functional test cases into your stability package, right? I always like to start with the things that are more common in the house, more prevalent protocol interactions. So things like DHCP test cases, drop a bunch of those in. DNS, ARP, stuff like that, because that's very, very common within a home network. So put as many of those functional test cases in as possible. Again, try to make sure that the ones that you do add pass, just to make it easier for yourself to identify the exact point in time where things start to go off the rails, if they do go off the rails.
Right.
So another example, in addition to adding more functional test cases, is increasing the number of LAN clients. Like if you ran it initially with 10 or 15 LAN clients, bump that number up, go to 32, go to 64. If you were testing with just Ethernet clients, add some wireless clients in there, mix it all up, right?
Yeah.
Have a mix of both Ethernet and wireless clients and push the client count up, and then run the stability test that way. That's also really interesting as well. It's another way that you can, the more clients, the more tests, the longer you run it, the higher your confidence is that your device is actually stable and robust over longer periods of time. Another dimension to all of this is that you can actually run the same stability test package with different device configs. So, for example, let's say you ran your stability tests using DHCP as the WAN mode, and that looked good, and you ran it for a week, and you did all of the things I just mentioned. You added more tests, you added more clients. Great. You can feel pretty good about that. Now you can take and run that same stability package in PPPoE WAN mode.
Right.
Or DHCPv6, different DHCPv6 WAN modes as well, right? And now you can actually start to build up confidence across a large number of device configs that the stability is good over long periods of time with a lot of clients and a lot of things going on.
And that's even easier to do with parallel testing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You could have multiple copies of the exact same same firmware, same hardware, have those connected on one system and run a stability test on each one of those. The only difference being the configuration of the device, right? This is the DHCP stability test, DHCP WAN, I should say, stability test. This is the PPPoE WAN stability test, and so on. Right. And so now you've got a big matrix of test results and very high confidence that things are working well.
So we have talked about this obviously in a couple of our articles, but also how to incorporate it using CD Router's parallel testing, which, but really as part of your overall testing strategy. So if people haven't checked out parallel testing, yet. It is one of the best ways that you can add stability testing to your process. And please take a look at our white paper on your test automation strategy, because it really covers a lot of these scenarios, and it will help you build an overall strategy that can incorporate things like stability into your test.
And if you have any questions, let us know. We love talking about this stuff, and we're happy to share our experience and give you pointers on how to set things up if you're interested in doing more with stability testing.